Graveyard shift workers of Reddit, what crazy creepy unbelievable things have you seen working in the dead of night? Possibly NSFW. I used to work in a hospital, in the ID department, and we did a number of overnight rollouts, as well as on-call work/response when issues occurred overnight. Many weird things happened, or appeared to happen. The thing that struck me as oddest was when I saw the coroner running at full speed down the corridor, in the opposite direction, towards the morgue. This guy, an older guy in his 50s or so, was going at full speed. I had never seen him above an amble before, but this time he was really going for it. As he got close to me, he yelled out of the way, "I got another live one." I'm not sure what was more disturbing, the fact that he was dealing with what I could only assume was a dead body that now appeared to be alive, or the fact he said another. Worked in hotels for several years. A surprising number of sleepwalkers sleep in the nude. They wander out of their rooms without their keys and have to be let back in. Verifying their identities can be a bit of a chore. Nothing creepy or weird, but I operate machinery, and there's a fox that comes up to my door every time I stop and waits for food. He's been doing this for 4 months now, pretty darn cute. I have an interesting job where I ride around Chicago all night in a tanker with a pump on it. Basically a mobile gas station. One night I was fueling some school buses in the ghetto when I heard some loud pops. Immediately afterwards I was hit by bits of masonry from the wall I was standing next to. We wear bright headlights on our heads and my guess is someone was taking pot shots at me from a tenement across the street. Called the police, and they didn't even show up. I did finish fueling the buses though, without my headlight, while crawling around on the gravel doing some tactical rolls for the children. I've worked graveyards most of my life. One time while working in a gas station a guy came in and committed suicide in the bathroom. He sliced his wrists open with a pocket knife. Didn't have to clean the blood, since it's a biohazard but still gross. Another time I was working late nights detailing cars for the police. They would bring in wrecks or impounds that needed to be cleaned in order to sell. I got this one where a guy shot his brains out with a 12 gauge. Blood and brains were everywhere in the cab of the truck. The only thing I had was a small carpet cleaning machine with a long clear tube with an attachment for upholstery. Needless to say I saw all the brain chunks getting sucked up through the tube. For some reason, that made it worse than actually having to sit in the cab full of brains and blood. I have more, but those were the worst. Working as a pastry chef for a resort in the mountains, pulling a graveyard shift. Because we were in a kinda remote location it was very dark outdoors. I was taking the trash out to the dumpster, which was a short walk away. As I got near the dumpster I heard rustling and scraping, shined my flashlight at the noise, and saw 2 glowing white eyes. At this point I nearly lost it, then as the creature turned its head I saw that it was a black bear, raiding our trash. Following the only advice I knew, I threw my arms up, and made myself look as big as possible. The bear ran off, and afterwards we got better locks for our dumpster. I'm an astronomer and I get calls late at night asking about UFOs. One guy called claiming to see a second sun on our all-night high-sensitivity cameras. He didn't believe us when we told him it was asterisk asterisk THEMOON asterisk asterisk. I work nights on an oil rig sometime. I browse the internet a lot, and all I notice is that everyone on Reddit starts typing with an Australian or European accent. It's weird. Square 1, mall in southern Ontario, Canada. Some guy who was clearly on drugs and or drunk smashed his way into a closed restaurant around 130 am. It was Johnny Rockets. Flipped tables, smashed windows, threw a ton of kitchen supplies onto the ground. Total damage is estimated to be around $6,000 CAD. Somewhere in the midst of all this he cut himself and bled on a ton of different surfaces. Additionally, he peed on several different walls and into a few cups. Lastly, he left a nice not so little use smack dab in the middle of the kitchen floor. Mall security later found him passed out naked in front of Lululemon and called the cops who took him into custody. Geo Canada. I work overnights at a gym. I'm here right now, and I always hear weird stuff in the middle of the night. Last month at 3:25 in the morning, the cash register opened on its own and 2 receipts printed out with staff members' names on them. My boss got in at 7 AM and I told her about it and she said she woke up from a scary dream at 3:25. Messed. 1 point Christmas night last year or the year before. I'm sitting at my desk and see smoke outside the window. Second floor office building. I stand up and there is a car engulfed in flames. Coworker dials 911. I head down to make sure there isn't someone sitting in the car or anything. Couldn't find anyone, which I thought was odd, and headed back in. Turns out the car was stolen, used in a robbery, and torched in our parking lot. 2 point security does nightly rounds 1:30 AM and 5:15 AM, 2:15 AM. No one has come by. Call down to make sure everything is okay. No answer. Walk down. Guard is on the floor. Had a stroke. Ended up living, but has serious mental problems, and was never able to come back to work. I'm sure there is more I'll think of. Night shift is great. Probably be buried. At a gas station. Had a man who was amazed we sold bugler rolling papers, and said it would sell for $500 in jail. He then purchased the papers and a White Owl cigar. They come in plastic tubes. He commented that he was a virgin to that size, and then asked to use the restroom, so he could stick the papers up his ass. He returned and asked me to call the cops on him, since he had an open warrant, and not mention his plan to smuggle papers into jail. When the cops arrived they ran his name and such, and found no warrants or reason to take the man to jail. They left and the dude got all sad, and walked off into the night. There's a lady writing a letter to a judge at my hotel desk right now. It will get her exonerated once I fax it for her. She asked me how to spell warrant. This job is 100% surreal. Not my story, but my dad's. He's been a nurse for 20 plus years now, most of which was spent in the ER. For a while, he was working third shift at this old hospital in Chicago. One night, a man died, and my dad was left with the lovely task of pushing the guy on the gurney to the hospital's morgue. This next part sounds so cliche because it's something straight out of a B horror film. Poorly lit hall, tile walls and floors, complete silence except for a squeaky wheel on the gurney. To top off a creepy old hospital at night, the body had gone stiff at this point, and the man's arm kept sliding out from under the sheet and hanging down. Put the arm back up. Falls back down. Nothing supernatural, but my dad still has nightmares about it where the body will pull the sheet down and smile up at my dad. He has so many awful stories of things he's seen. Poor guy has PTSD. Saw a guy with brain coming out of his ear and out of his eye socket at about 4 AM. It made a couple people in the room almost vomit. I saw a ghost behind old man Willard's grave. A spooky ghost. Long ago I worked grave at a gas station. We would use chopped paper and solvent to clean oil off the drive up bays. One night the wind was gusting from every direction at once. Tried to clean, but the paper kept blowing in my eyes, so I quit and went to sit in the office. About 3 o'clock AM I get the feeling of being watched. Turn to look out the wall-sized window in time to see the swirling paper forming a female-shaped whirlwind centered between 2 handprints on the window. It stood there for about 20 seconds or so, then seemed to turn and run with the wind into the night. I went out to see if I could see any greasy handprints outside on the glass that would explain why the paper would stick there, but the glass was clean. This will probably get buried, but here it goes. I worked for one of the Kroger stores in my area as an overpass stoker. While I was out on a smoke break at around 3 AM, this Chevy Tahoe pulls up. And it's got a lady and her 2 children in it. Gonna have to say around 4 and 5 years old. She sits there for a minute, and another car pulls up. She gets in the other car, leaving her kids in the Tahoe. I didn't really think much of it. Maybe a drug deal or something, but then I notice that the car is rocking. Apparently she was a hooker on the job, and it was bring your children to work night. I work for a shipping company at an airport loading and unloading planes. One night we just finished loading a 767 and was tearing down the plane getting ready to send it out. After we moved the cones and pulled the chokes from the landing gear and hooked up the pushback, we were giving the go ahead to disconnect the ground power unit, GPU, from the plane. A guy on the crew disconnects it from the plane before cutting off the circuit of electricity from the GPU to the plane, so when he disconnected it, it armed from the plane to plug, resulting in a huge fireball that completely burned his hands and part of his face. That is the craziest event that I actually seen happen, but I have heard quite a few crazy stories of things that have taken place before I started working my third shift job. Spelling. We have a man with a full beard who wanders around our store cross-dressing in full female attire. He wears a skirt with nothing underneath. It is a short skirt. When he bends down you get a very unwanted look at his junk. I work night shift at a 711. No one is probably going to believe this, but a large homeless man marched into our store with a giant stick, took his shirt off, knocked our donuts to the ground, and then proceeded to run around the store shouting for God to protect him until a cross-dresser from the local gay club and I cornered him until police arrived. The police refused to arrest him, instead forcing him just off our property, where he stood there 12 hours straight shouting to the heavens. Nobody will see this, but whatever. This not so bright buddy of mine used to work late shift at a fast food place. This one night a car rolls by in the drive-thru and suddenly he's looking down the barrel of a 9mm. The guy shouts, "Jim, the cash in the register." My bold friend bends down and says no, and promptly shuts the window on him. The guy drives off confused. The next day the manager is reviewing the tapes and quickly goes up to him to ask him what happened. My friend says he just closed the window because it was bulletproof. Manager stares at him and says no they aren't. My friend properly freaks out about how close he got to getting shot. TL. Doctor, my friend was brave when he thought he was behind bulletproof glass. I've seen plenty of shadows and figures moving around in the shop I work at. We've had cranes start swaying and hear things shift and bang together. The craziest was when there were only 2 of us left for the night. I was at my desk and the other person was at their toolbox about 50 feet away. I then heard something walk through the tank behind me. It was 5 footsteps and the tank started bouncing up and down. When I looked over at the other guy who was still at his toolbox and heard it too, we realized that no one was there. That's when we decided it was time to get out of there. Currently on a brief graveyard stint at an office job, but nothing really crazy to report here. Back in college, however, I worked at a 24-hour CVS as a cashier. A homeless man came in one night, dropped trowel right in the middle of aisle 3, and dropped a turd right there. Popped open some toilet paper right there to clean himself, and left. Edit. Apparently I'm not the only one who has seen such atrocities. Things really get crazy when your circadian clock gets all out of whack, insomnia sets in, and the shadow people start appearing around hour 40. Those are the truly crazy times. I've been working the graveyard shift as a security guard for 5 years now, and spent 2 years at a hospital. Part of our job on thirds was doing director's runs. What that meant is if someone died, then we had to bring a stretcher up to the room, help them transfer the body to the stretcher, and then take it to the morgue. The reason we got stuck doing it is the hospital was trying to save money, so they cut the transporters down to only working on first shift. The rest of the time it was security's job. I always asked a nurse to go with me because our morgue was tiny and it was hard to unlock the morgue, open it and maneuver the stretcher in with only one person. Plus I just didn't want to be riding on an elevator alone with a corpse. Fortunately I didn't have to do many, probably around 5 or so, but it gave me the creeps every time.